Okay. Feel free to start whenever you're ready.
You talking to me?
Oh, yeah, thank you.
You're saying I can start?
Yeah, whenever you're ready.
Okay, good. Hi. Hi, everyone. I don't know if I'm now officially a Jewish Husky, but I am technically, as of tonight, when Daniel first contacted me, he asked whether I would come out to Boston, to Northeastern, and I said, I'm not somebody who likes to run away from a fight. I'm ready to rock and go, but are you sure you want me? I thought, maybe you should ask around because I'm not sure this is a good idea. It just looks like, looking for a fight. Now, and then Daniel called back and he said, no, you know what? We've given it some more thought. We've talked to the camera people and we think it is maybe more advisable to be virtual. But let me just say this. I find it appalling that this was a question for me not to come from Brooklyn to Boston. This is just not what universities do. You're young, you don't know the history of universities in America, but it's embarrassing. It's not just you. I've had this problem at Berkeley in particular. I'm now part of a lawsuit. I'm part of a lawsuit of 15 people that is suing Berkeley Law School. I've spoken at Berkeley before. When I walked in, they hand out leaflets that said, Thane Rosenbaum believes in killing Palestinian children. And when I started to speak, the people in the back of the room were pounding on the desks. That was the last time I was pounding on the desk. When the security finally removed them, my first words were, do you realize University of California, Berkeley is the birthplace of the free speech movement? Aren't you humiliated that you can't listen to me for 50 minutes without having a heart attack, without freaking out, without grinding your teeth down, without chanting stupid, idiotic, genocidal slogans? Really? This is how you were raised? Really? This is what you think college is about? So I just think this is something to be remembered. I wasn't sure when Daniel called. I said, I'm ready to go, but I seriously doubted that Daniel would get an okay, because the truth was, by now, what I just said, it would have been over. It would have been ball game. Everything I just said, no one would have wanted to hear it. So anyway, I thought you should hear that, and I'm glad I said it. I'm here to talk about proportionality and a number of things, because, your group in particular, I think, is not just sensitive to Israel's security, but you're sensitive to the conversation about Israel and Hamas. And you know a lot more. I hope you do. But I am sort of shocked in traveling around the country, frankly, the world, in what people don't know, what they don't ask questions about, which is just shocking to me. Now, do I think it would make a difference if I gave you the script? And I will. I'm going to give you in 50 minutes everything you need to know to have any intelligent conversation with anyone. Do I think it'll make a difference? No, it's only good for you, because you should know what you're saying, and you should know how anti-Semitic the people are you're talking to. You should know how much Jew hatred is there, because you've just destroyed what they believe to be their legal and moral argument. You just crushed it. You said, I listened to Thane Rosenbaum for 50 minutes, and fuck, I have everything I need to know. Everything I need to know. But I'll say this, it won't matter. You're going to hear a lot of people shouting and screaming and threatening you, and that's what they do. It's what they do. And so this is not an argument worth winning. I wouldn't get killed at a hilltop for it. I think you should just be aware, have measured expectations. People don't want to know. These are very inconvenient truths, but at least you'll have what I think is the essential information to be able to hear what you're hearing and know how ridiculous it sounds. Right. I mean, you all know, before we get to the word proportionality, well, you know what? Let me start someplace else. I want to start someplace else. So on October 7th, you're all listening, right? We're all here. On October 7th, 40 Jewish babies were beheaded. Now, I should just stop right there. And there's nothing else to say. I've been doing this on media for the last, just right there. 40 babies were beheaded. Who does that? What kind of civilization, what kind of people, what kind of a religion would do that, tape it, own it, be prideful of it, instead of being mortified and humiliated? 40 beheadings. Now we can get to the mass raping, which only in the last few days people are starting to talk about. Women's groups have run away from this. Where are the feminists when it came to the mass gang raping of Jewish teenagers? Now, the reason I stop is because what you've just heard is so heinous that international law doesn't apply to this. And that's what your first sentence would say. Don't tell me about international humanitarian law. I just heard from a 35-year law professor, and what he said is two things. First of all, you should know this. If anyone tells you, if they use the word international humanitarian law, or if they use the word international law, or if they are citing Amnesty International, a United Nations committee of any kind, or Human Rights Watch, they're Jew haters. Just know that up front. Anyone who says that, they are Jew haters. That's what this is about. And they're using this as a cover. You know, that they'll Jew haters who went to Princeton. You know, you don't have to be impressed. I'm not impressed. But they'll say they went to Princeton and Yale, and they will tell you what international law says. And they will tell you what the statements issued by Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch. And I can tell you, having debated these people for decades, first of all, they're really stupid. They're really dishonest. They're intellectually dishonest, and they're bullies. They think that they went to Princeton means that you can't possibly know that they're lying, and that what this is really it's really a cover for how much they ultimately hate Jews. Why is this important? Because if you behead 40 babies and you gang rape a number of Israeli teenagers, you are beyond operating within the scope or the laws of war. The rules of engagement don't apply to you. Are you kidding me? You're invoking international law with this, right? And even the word proportionality, which we will talk about. It's extremely important to understand that the rules that we would normally apply in a situation, the Geneva Convention never met a Gazan. And had they met a Gazan, I promise you they would have said, oh shit, we have to put in a different subsection here. The Gazans are different. They're different. They want to be martyrs. They democratically elected a terrorist organization to be their leaders. They have had already 4 wars with Israel. Each time they got flattened, and people still love Hamas. And so when you watch on television, MSNBC, what Hamas has done to their people, I'm not sure that's actually true. Polling still shows that Hamas would win any election in Gaza. And guess what? Here's the horrifying thing. They would win any election in the West Bank. So when people talk about land for peace or two-state solution, just laugh in their face. Just go, with who? Where are my partners on a two-state solution? The Palestinian people are absolutely in love, infatuated with dead Jews. It excites them in a way that is so pathological, so sick, so diseased, that to apply these other concepts to them is just intellectual nonsense. And so what you're doing is saying Israel needs to be held to a standard that would be operable, it would be appropriate in an actual war zone, but not in Gaza, not in this kind of what's called urban asymmetric warfare, or sometimes it's referred to as 4th generation warfare. What does that mean? And let me tell you what you guys are hearing from me tonight. People at West Point are reading about this right now. That's what they're doing every day. They're doing calculus, and they're trying to figure this other stuff out. What are they trying to figure out? Hamas doesn't wear a uniform. They dress with head covers, and they look like a dentist. They don't look like anything you should shoot at. On top of that, they're surrounding themselves with children and they drive around in ambulances. I'm sorry. It is so preposterous that you should be all over these liars. They're liars. The Geneva Convention never expected that. They expected warfare where people meet in battlefields and you can't run into a farmhouse and pull civilians out that don't want to be there. That's what the Geneva Convention was thinking. The Geneva Convention never said, please, Hamas, use my apartment as a command center. Please, Hamas, store your weapons in my apartment. Please, Hamas, take my child and use him as a human shield. It is utter nonsense if someone tells you that they're forced to do this. Some may be, but they are true believers. They believe this. This is important to them. They say to themselves constantly, we are a nation of martyrs. What do you think they're telling you? They've said it repeatedly since October 7th. We are a nation of martyrs. In fact, let me give you the exact quote the spokesman had. Are you ready for this? Please sit down because it's sickening. This is the statement. We will repeat the October 7th massacre again and again and again. 3 agains. Until Israel is destroyed. We are a nation of martyrs. What? And we are proud of it. Ready for the last sentence? We will sacrifice as many Palestinian lives as it takes. I'm going to give you a few minutes to process that. You're actually having a conversation with some lying imbecile who doesn't understand what that meant, doesn't understand what Israel's moral dilemma is. That is basically, let me just tell you what that statement is. It's really, if Israel wanted to, it's a blank check to bomb Gaza to oblivion. It's done. If Israel wanted to, what I just read to you, this is enough. This is enough. That statement again and again and again after 4 wars, right? Proportionality doesn't mean you took one person, I take one person. It's not like an eye for an eye. It doesn't mean that Israel needs to go. Jews don't do this, by the way. You can't get a Jew to do this. Only Muslims would do this. And hey, I've nothing, it's not all Muslims. It's 1.6 billion Muslims. And I'm afraid 900 million of them believe this, right? So it's not all, but the polling is pretty clear. 900 million Muslims believe in a strict adherence to Sharia law. They are true believers in the Hadith and the Quran and all the lessons that they're learning from the Ayatollahs and the mullahs, and they believe this. And so if it's not based on one-to-one, which meaning it's not like Israel has the right or would go to Gaza and behead 40 Gazan children. Jews wouldn't do this. We just don't do it. We've never done it. It's not what we do. Sorry. It's what you do. We don't do this. Jewish soldiers would not go and mass rape Gazan women. It's not what we do. It's just not Jewish. But if you're thinking that proportionality means that, right? And if you ask people and you say, can we go over and behead 40 babies? They'd go nuts. If you say, can the idea, oh, they would go nuts. You can't. For some reason, we're living on a planet now that Palestinian Gazans are exempt from the rules of war and the concept of collateral damage. As if to say, you can't kill anybody. Unless you know they're a Hamas fighter, you can't kill anyone. And I'm saying there has never been a war fought like that. There is nothing in any of the laws of wars, the canon of wars, there's nothing like that. That's being made up by a lot of professors, most of them who and I would say the same thing of Harvard. The ones that are doing that at Northwestern are lightweights. They're stupid. They've got nothing going on in their life but this. They've got no research. They can't write a sentence. They're nobodies. If they didn't have a job at Northeastern, they'd be doing nothing. Because if they're telling their students this, it's an absolute lie. Because as I said before, that what I read to you before, the existential threat, the disproportionate isn't based on imbalanced numbers. It has nothing to do with numbers. So when they say the Hamas health ministry says 13,000, look, you can never trust those numbers. But let's go with those numbers. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many thousand. All Israel needs to show, and they do, is that they are striking military targets. And these are all legitimate military targets. If Hamas, it's horrifying. If Hamas wants to fill those military targets with children and women, this is the sort of thing that Barack Obama and Tony Blair and the Secretary General of United Nations and Bernie Sanders, if you got a problem with this, you got to get on a plane, you got to go to Gaza, go to Egypt, go to the border and say, let go of the Jewish hostages immediately and let us have your civilians. We're not going to let you, because we are holding you, Hamas, responsible. We're not holding Israel responsible. Article 51 of the United Nations gives each member state a legal right to defend itself. And the argument on proportionality is you cannot retaliate disproportionate to the military objective, right? So that means that if you're trying to kill one person and you end up killing 10,000, you've got a disproportionate death. You have to show this is a communication center, this is a command center, this is where a cache of weapons are, these are where the major tunnels are. And Israel, and they will, believe me, there will be many investigations by the International Criminal Court and the United Nations. In Israel, every year, the press will say they're in violation of international law. And you heard what I said, right? If the person says the word international law, just look at them and say anti-Semite. That's the only person that are evoking that, is that, because they're not being honest about the moral and legal dilemma that Israel ultimately is facing here, which is they have a sworn enemy that is using civilians as shields and has taken hostages and has vowed to do it again and again and again. And so does this mean that you or I want Palestinian deaths, civilian deaths? No. But it's not Israel's responsibility to basically, because what you're doing essentially is rewarding terrorists and incentivizing them to continue to fight in what I would say, again, I didn't give it to you yet. I think I did. Asymmetric fourth generation warfare. What is that? Urban warfare surrounded by buildings, fighting people that are not wearing uniforms, who are hiding in rooms and in terraces. They're total insurgents, and they're using the civilian population to use them as shields, because what they are seeking is not a military win, they're seeking a political win. That's what they want. Hamas has played this game before, Hezbollah has played before. It doesn't sound good, but I'm telling you, the life of Muslims is cheap. It's cheap. It's really valueless. How do you know this? Because 500,000 Syrians were killed and no one seems to care. Because Hamas is using Palestinians as shields and no one seems to care. People should be so freaked out at what Hamas does with their own citizens. People should be getting on planes and going to Egypt and attacking them from the south, saying we're going to rescue your people. We are not holding Israel responsible. We're holding you. Now, again, I've said something that is ugly. It's hard to imagine. But the problem, what we see in the United States, is we have a dream. Here's the dream. We want to dress up a terrorist and make him look like an accountant or a lawyer or a banker at Goldman Sachs. They won't look like that. They don't want to wear a suit. They don't want that life. So that's why people are going, I don't understand it. If we just talk to them, aren't they like the people at the PTA meeting? No, they're not. Actually, they're not. They're not like the people who you meet whose kids plays in the same little league. They're not in the same what are those, what do they call those football leagues where you draft your own players? What do you call that? Does anyone know? You probably can't hear me.
Fantasy leagues.
Yeah, fantasy leagues, right. I mean, they're not doing that. That's not what makes them happy, right? And so this is what Barack Obama believed in, that if you just talk to them nice and talk to them about college hoops, Barack Obama was sure that if you just talk to Hamas and Iran about college hoops, they won't want to have a nuclear weapon. They're just like us. They're not. This is a culture war that's beyond culture. It is civilizational, and we've been fighting it for a long time. And unfortunately, you're fighting it on the streets of America now because you're really starting to see what I call the Arab street in America. Europeans have gotten used to it. There's only one people on the planet that can go to a town square and scream with thousands of people, death to America, death to Israel, death to British novelists, death to Danish cartoonists, death to the Pope. Who are you? What are you, crazy? Could you imagine if the people from Luxembourg were just shouting, death to the French, death to the French? Or if the Canadians were doing this? We have given them a blank check. It's okay. In college, you know what we call that? Moral relativism. It's another sickness that you've been brainwashed with. It's a sickness that says, who are we to tell another culture that their traditions are bad? There are people in your campus right now, trust me, who, if you ask them, would say this: who am I to tell an Islamic extremist not to cut off a head? It's one of their cherished traditions. They love it. We do weird shit too. Like we have tailgate parties and they like to behead people. Literally, there are people on your campus that believe that cultural relativism and moral relativism means that. It means that we will simply, and that's why you won't see faculty members condemning Hamas. That's why you don't see all the people that are marching and screaming from the, no one is challenging Hamas. Why? Well, first of all, they're rooting Hamas on. And there is a level of it that says, if you are a person of color, we don't question your moral decisions. We just don't. We don't question it. We just assume you're a person of color. You've been oppressed by white colonialists, and we just let you do what you got to do. Now, some of your faculty members are saying that. I wish they were saying it. At least you can just laugh at them when they say it if they're honest, but most of them are not honest about it. They're not telling you exactly what they think. In a world of moral relativism, there is simply no stoppage. There's no stoppage. And so that's why we're seeing a lot of things that are becoming acceptable without condemnation, and how Jews are sort of swept up in the identity politics argument because of the nature of white privilege. Israel is fighting an asymmetric warfare with people who are now being told that the rules of war and the rules of engagement apply to them. How many of you know, probably don't, when the war first started, we learned that, I think it was President Biden immediately said, to his credit, Hamas is ISIS. Remember that? He kept saying that. And Blinken said, they said it. And I remember I did a lot of media, and I said, I didn't want to be right, but I said, yeah, they're saying this today, but as days go on, they're going to back off. They're going to back off, and they're going to use another word. They're going to talk about disproportion. They're going to say, yeah, but you killed so many more people than Hamas killed on October 7th. You got to stop. You got to stop. And as you heard from me to say, there is simply nothing in international law that should stop Israel from continuing until every Hamas fighter is dead, or every person that supports the idea that Israel needs to be destroyed. As long as their attacks are as precise as possible, as long as every effort is being made to avoid the targeting of civilians, precision matters, intelligence gathering matters. Trust me, the IDF is right now preparing huge volumes to be ready to be investigated. And they are going to show, and Israelis are good at this, every single bomb, where it went and why it went there. They're going to get hammered. There is going to be a UN commission to again, delegitimize Israel. And what you will see is the Israelis are good at this. They've done it. They will show you everything that they did and why they did it. They may have been mistaken. Some of the intelligence may have been faulty. That is, again, the tragedy of wars. And as I said, I know no moral principle where Palestinians are more valuable than other civilians around the world in war zones who were killed by collateral damage and civilian death. I don't know of any war that happened. You know how I know that for sure? Well, 11,000 Iraqis or Afghanis. Mosul is in Iraq, right? Right? Or is it? Yeah, it's in Iraq. During the fight of ISIS, 11,000 civilians were killed. That's a lot. Did you know that? Were there any protests? The United States was part of the coalition forces. Were there any war crimes issued against the United States? 11,000 people. You know what that meant? Mosul was flattened and ISIS was killed. And 11,000 others were killed too. And all we're hearing about is about Palestinian loss of life. Again, I know of no moral principle that Palestinians are more valuable or more precious than other people. I would make the argument, by the way, that since they seemingly invented global terrorism, they're actually a little less valuable. But I don't want to go that far. They're really, if I'm saying, if that's the best you can do is invent tires that have fire on it and roll it, or sending kites with fire on the tails, if that's what you think your kids should be learning to do, that's the reason you're not ready for nationhood. You're not interested in nation building. Your kids will never win a Nobel Prize in anything because this is what they were taught by you. But I don't understand why a special set of rules protecting Palestinians applies to them alone. Now, in World War II, we know that, because you know this from the Barbie movie. Oh, no, not the Barbie movie, the Oppenheimer movie. Kids just forgot. It's not in Barbie, it's in Oppenheimer. You know about the dropping of the atomic bomb, and that film teaches you about the creation of the bomb. There was no talk in that time about safe corridors or humanitarian relief. No one was talking about that for the Japanese. And you know one of the reasons why? Not just Pearl Harbor. It's not just Pearl Harbor, which would have been October 7th. It's that the intelligence was that the Japanese were simply never going to give up. That their commitment to the emperor was so great, they were never going to kill him. You can look at Harry Truman, who dropped the bomb, and say he's a mass murderer. And let me tell you, there are people in the United States, I'm sure every faculty member at Northeastern thinks that Harry Truman was a mass murderer for dropping the 2 atomic bombs. He knew there would be an enormous amount of civilian loss, but he dropped it at places that were weapons facilities, production facilities for submarines and other warfare. It's definitely true in Dresden, the bombing of Dresden. And we don't hear, I mean, you probably do at some history class, but that's what America faced, but no one talked about it. You know why? Because Americans weren't seen as Jews. If Jews had to drop the atomic bomb anywhere, it would have been over. It would have been mass murderers, genocide inflictors. At the end of the war in Germany, there were some bombings. You may have heard the bombing over Dresden. Dresden was the 7th largest city in Germany. And I would say, since I've been there, it's probably one of the prettiest cities in the world. They finally rebuilt it. The British and the Americans flattened it and killed 25,000 people. There were munitions factories and weapon facilities, and it was a hub of transportation between Germany, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary. It had significant military significance. And because of that, they bombed the hell out of it, and 25,000 people were killed. Let me tell you another dark secret that nobody wants to confront. And it is horrible. It's horrible. And I hate to tell you this because it makes you think that Hamas maybe isn't as bad as you think, which is that when the Soviets finally got through to Germany, there were reports of thousands of women raped by Soviet soldiers. And the Germans, even to this day, this sticks in their mind. If you go up to a German of a certain age and you say the word Dresden, their facial expression will change. Why? Because they're going to say, I know the Nazis were horrible, but were you allowed to do that? Weren't you already about to win the war? You were allowed to do that? And the Soviet Union, the Russian soldiers could do that to our women? And the answer is certainly not the gang raping, for sure. But the question was, given what was their enemy, what Nazism was, that its avowed purpose was to take over the world, that it took over most of Europe, that it killed 11 million civilians, 6 million of them were Jews, 1 million children, given the scope of the crime and the intention of where we were going with Nazism, I'm not sure there were any rules that would have applied to the Allies. I'm not sure. Under a true principle of proportionality. Not sure. If you look at the globe and look where Hitler was and look what he was doing in the death camps to Jews and gypsies and homosexuals, I don't know. And you know what the Russians would say if we were in Russia right now? If there was a Thane Rosenbaum in Russia talking to university, you know what he would say, or she? It would say this. I hope it wasn't a she, because then she'd have to be justifying rape, and who could do that? They would say, we lost 30 million Russians to the Germans. We were fighting on their side. They double-crossed us, and then they attacked us. And in fighting, we lost 30 million people. 30 million people. You know what you actually don't hear in the US press, because we're sympathetic to Ukraine? We don't hear that this is what Putin is telling his people every day. And that's why, if he has any public support, that's the reason. You know what that's why he uses the word Nazis when he refers to Ukraine. He's hitting a very powerful psychological nerve among Russians, which is what we fought 2 world wars, World War I and World War II, and Poland and Ukraine was a pathway into Russia. It created a path, a road to come and kill Russians. And we need a big run-up, right? Which is exactly interesting what Israel is saying now. They're saying, we don't want to occupy Gaza, but I'll tell you what we do want. We want a big run-up from the Gaza border. That Gaza border can't be there. There needs to be military forces to protect Israelis so they can't just bust through a fence and paraglide over again. So you may have heard that argument, that what Israelis are saying. Oddly enough, they're making an argument that the Russians made, and it's what Russians do and say to justify rape. It's vulgar, it's disgusting, but it goes to the heart of proportionality. It means that certain rights are created by people that have been attacked. When you are under attack, under the United Nations Charter, the right to defense triggers the laws of war, the laws of armed conflict, the laws of engagement, the Geneva Convention, and they're all of a sudden triggered. What's the problem? The problem is Hamas doesn't play by those rules. And so to apply them strictly against Hamas means Israel can't kill anybody. Now, if you ask one of these people that think, they'll say killing one Palestinian is too much. Any Palestinian. You can't kill one. But if you kill one, you're already, I can assure you, if you do a Google search, you will see the word disproportion on October 8th. One day later, already the word disproportion was being invoked. But if you went to those people and you said, all right, I get it. You don't want to see any civilian loss. But you do realize Israel has a right to self-defense. You do realize that Hamas uses shields. You know that Hamas has already made a statement, in addition to their covenant and charter, that says they have no interest in ever stopping in their bloodlusts for Jews. What should Israel do? You know what happens immediately? They need to go take a piss. They make a phone call. They're gone. They can't. Well, my mother's calling me. Oh shit, I'm late for class. Oh no, I forgot. Oh, I can't believe it. I'll get back to you. That's what they'll say. Everyone's got a very strong opinion, absolutely, on campus or on the New York Times or the Boston Globe or any mainstream magazine or any museum or publishing houses where people have been indoctrinated to hate people of white people and to hate Jews especially, right? This is the generation that we've developed, a generation that hates people who are white and especially hates white Jews. Again, nobody points out the fact that half of Israel are people of color. No, it's an inconvenient truth. To them, to people who see Israel as a settler colonial state, every Israeli is from Brookline or from Brooklyn or from Brentwood, any of those B cities. You know, they're all American Ashkenazi Jews. They're not dark-skinned at all. But no one has an answer for what Israel can do. And I've been doing this for many, many years, and I've been involved in many, many debates. And I can tell you, many people say, I got to go to the bathroom. Sorry, I got to go. Got to go. Can't talk about it. Sometimes they say, you know, I haven't figured that out yet. Convenient. I know there's an answer. I haven't figured. I'll get back to you. But in the meantime, stop Israel from killing anybody. They're not allowed to. You know, there's an interesting anecdote about Amos Oz. You may not know who he is, but he's one of Israel's most famous novelists. He died a number of years ago, but it was after the 2014 war in Gaza. And he was one of the founders of Israel's Peace Now movement. This was the movement that led to the Oslo Accords. When Israelis really were, guess what? I was like them. I was like them. And let me just to be clear, I am a registered Democrat, and I count myself as a liberal. That's important. You were listening to a liberal, not a progressive, a liberal. Don't let them hijack the word liberal. Liberal means you're open. You're not a hysteric. You're not a crazy person. You don't cancel people. You don't threaten and dox them. You're aware. You let them talk. You don't interrupt them. And you say, you know what? I hadn't considered that before. I don't think I agree with it, but let me sit with it for a few days. That's what a liberal does. It's a normal person, a person that's open to intellectual argument, intellectual inquiry. What you're facing on campus is a new wave of progressive politics, not liberal politics. So I don't want there to be any confusion that you're saying, well, we heard from some right-wing Jewish American nut. No, I'm not right-wing. I voted for Biden. So just to show you, it's just that I am intellectually honest and open. I'm giving you, basic core facts. I don't think I need to go through. Oh, let me just finish the Amos Oz story. Amos Oz was one of the founders of the Peace Now movement, which now almost doesn't exist in Israel. And they were picking up a lot of steam for the two-state solution. And they were very invigorated by the Oslo Accords and believed that it would lead to a Palestinian homeland. 7 years later, we learned it led to the Second Intifada. Bill Clinton, I don't want to speak for him, he despises, segments of Palestinians because he gave them 98% of the deal that they purportedly wanted. And on the eve of the end of his presidency, he thought he would leave the White House as one of the great statesmen in American history. And instead, they came back with the Second Intifada, not a counteroffer. They didn't accept the 98%. The Palestinians have, as you must know, I hope, have rejected 5 offers of statehood. 5 offers since 1947. I can go through it with you if you want, if you need to, but it's 5. And it's really extraordinary when you think about how many years they would have had a state. And as I said before, they're really not interested in nation building. Don't let people kid you, end the occupation. There's not one Jew that lives in Gaza since 2005. Why is there a blockade? When someone asks you about the blockade, you know what your first thing you say to them? Why does Egypt have the same blockade? They're Arabs. Why are they okay with that? Why? Because the Egyptians aren't stupid. They don't want terrorists from the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. They don't. They don't want it. Nobody wants the Palestinians, and they're tiring of them. That's why the Abraham Accords was being initiated, because most of the Arab world has figured out what I just said to you. The only interest they have is dead Jews and not having Jewish neighbors. They don't really care about nationhood because they rejected 5 offers. So Amos Oz was on a new book tour, and he was in Germany of all places. And it was the Gaza war, the last war, when the word disproportion happened. You heard it a lot. You're going to hear it again. And so before they talked about the novel, the German broadcasters couldn't resist. They said, Mr. Oz, you are one of the founders of the Peace Now movement. What do you say about your country killing Palestinians? And there was a pause, and everyone expected, this is the leader of the founder of the Peace Now movement. Amos Oz said the following. He said, my neighbor goes on his terrace and puts his child on his lap and takes an Uzi machine gun and starts firing bullets into my child's nursery. What am I supposed to do? And the German broadcaster was silent. And it went on for 10 seconds or so with nervousness. And then Amos Oz said, I got another one for you. My next door neighbor builds a tunnel under my apartment, and it leads directly under my children's nursery. What am I supposed to do? Tripped him up. He thought that he had the Peace Now movement, the head of the Peace Now movement. Not stupid. This is Amos Oz. What do you want me to do? What do you expect of Jews? What do you expect of Israelis that you wouldn't do yourself? How do we know this? Mosul, Nagasaki, Hiroshima, Dresden, 500,000 Syrians, many of whom were gassed. Where were the protests? Where were the hunger strikes? Where were the UN resolutions? I don't remember one. And the fact that no one can answer why there isn't one can only be answered in one word: anti-Semitism, Jew hatred. There's no other, it's solve for X. What's X? X is always the same. Jews. We are not granting you the same privilege that we would do in killing ISIS. No one questioned what we did to kill ISIS because everyone thought that the world was better off without ISIS. The reality is even the Egyptians would think that the world is better off without Hamas. And I can tell you, no matter what is being said tepidly out of the Abraham Accord states, every single one of them is privately rooting for Israel. This is Israel's problem. It's always been their problem. People privately root for them. They don't say it, but they in their heart, they go, you know what? I hope they invent another phone. They invent cool shit. We should let them invent stuff. We should let them do stuff because they'll definitely get to cancer. So we don't want to stop them from getting to cancer. They'll invent a cure for that. But, we can't openly say that we support them. And so this is the problem. Now, I said to you before, we started out and then we'll take some questions. I said to you before, I don't know what the level of the fight you have on campus. I can tell you my own children, I don't ever use their names because my name is so radioactive and there are so many death threats against me for the last 15 years that if you send me a Facebook page, you'll never see me in a restaurant. I'm never going to show you where I am at. I don't have an Instagram, not showing you where I'm a target. My honest advice to you is, and again, some of you are wearing kippas and you feel a strong connection to being Zionists. I think your campus is hopeless. I think all the campuses are hopeless. They are diseased. There's a mental pathology there. There has been a permission to be anti-Semitic, and they're loving it. They just love saying, kill Jews, river to the sea. They love it. I'm not sure that anything I told you, if I told you how to respond to apartheid, how to respond to genocide, how to respond to ethnic cleansing, how to respond to here's something that I don't know if we have time to do, and I won't do it. But, I have said for many years, because I'm a liberal and a Democrat, I believe in a two-state solution. But as a law professor, I'm ready to debate anybody right now. Most of the time, they won't debate me. They just don't. I say, I'm ready to devote that the word occupation doesn't apply. Israel made a gigantic mistake in using it to Oslo. They used it as a concession. It was stupid and it was wrong. It's not an occupation. There's a land dispute. That's what it is. It's a land dispute. And as a law professor, do you know what? I'm prepared to debate anyone you bring to me to make the argument that Israel has better title to the West Bank and Gaza than do the so-called Palestinian nation. You guys do know that there has never been for 1 minute a Palestinian nation. You do know that. Not for 1 minute was there a Palestinian currency or a Palestinian government in place or a Palestinian history or a Palestinian government leader who wasn't. Not for. So when people are talking about the stealing of Palestinian land, how? Then there was no state. There was nothing there. Now, does that mean that some Israelis didn't forcibly evict some Palestinians? In those days, they were simply called Arabs. Palestinians were used for the word Jews, not Palestinians. Were there some Palestinian Jews that evicted? Yes, there were some. The majority left on their own because they were promised by the 5 Arab countries that they would defeat Israel very quickly, which they obviously didn't. And then all of Israel would be given to the Palestinians. It's true, many people were displaced. But you know what else is true? My father's house, 17 Walowa Street in Radom, Poland, that's my house. Mine. All my uncles, they were all killed in the Holocaust. My father and brother were his brother were the only ones who survived. I want 17 Walowa Street back in Radom. I want it back. If I was a Palestinian, I would sit in a refugee camp from 1945 and grit my teeth and sit and hold my key until I got my house back, right? The petulance of the Palestinians, not that olive tree, but it has to be that olive tree, right? That I have to get exactly, they're the only refugees that have their own UN agency. All other refugees in the world are treated by one United Nations agency. You know what that agency requires? 1 generation of refugee status. That's it. You fold yourself into another country or you become a country, but we do not give you refugee status, only 1 generation. There's only 1 people on earth that are allowed through UNRWA to have a series of refugee status, 3rd generation, 4th generation. Why is that? Because Jews are the occupiers. If it was anyone else, they would be treated like the rest of the Palestinians. And so, again, even on the word occupation, there is an argument to be made that even that land is disputed land, that I would make the argument Israel has better title for the land, but I would personally like to see them give it away to a Palestinian nation that's willing to be a nation, not a nation of rejectionists and violence makers and terrorists and bomb makers, not that kind of a nation, but a nation that wanted, I wrote something 10 years ago in the last Hamas war, and then we'll take some questions and say goodnight. You know, nothing stopped, and you should say this to someone if you will, nothing stopped Hamas in 2007 from calling up Sheldon Adelson or any other Jewish casino magnate, anyone in Singapore, Macau, Las Vegas, and said, hey guys, by the way, did you know the best surfing is in Gaza? Gaza actually has the best waves. That place could rock. Gaza doesn't have to be a shithole. It doesn't have to be a place of just weapons. No. And kite flying with fire. No, it's not. You could have had hotels dotting all along the beach, and surfers would be there, and gamblers would be there. And they could have started that in 2000. They could have started that in 1947. But let's say in 2007, when Israel withdrew from Gaza, nothing stopped them from building hotels. Nothing. So when people say occupation, you should say, yeah, but they could have built hotels. Jews would have helped finance the hotels. They would have said, yeah, let me get a piece of the action. I'd like to be an owner to a hotel, and I want to be a surfer in Gaza. So what you're being drummed into language that is what I call, word distortion, occupation, apartheid, genocide. They simply don't apply here. And let me go back to the last thing I didn't finish, which is I'm giving you this sort of whatever you want to call this, tutorial, and you can use it any way you want. You can quote me any way you want. You could say, I hate the guy. I think he's a racist because, 99% of what I just said in this culture is called racist. I don't know why. I don't see it really, but I know in this culture, everything I just said would be shouted down as racist and Islam. And there's probably someone watching there who's going to write about this and say the racist thing, Rosenbaum was here, and there were some Jews wearing yarmulkes that were applauding him. They are racist too. So I'm saying, I don't know if this is a fight you can win on campus. I don't. And I think what Jews have done historically on campus is to get better grades and, take the LSATs. Because the people that are screaming from the river to the sea, they can't get into any graduate school. They just can't. They've spent their entire time growing a tumor in their hate for Jews. They were never better than a C- student, and they will never be better than a C- student. So I'm not trying to pump you up. I'm saying the same thing that I would say to my own kids. I think the university campus is lost. And I would prefer to see that you used your time more constructively, because what I just told you should be for your purpose in knowing that people are shitting on you. They're shitting with you. They're messing with your head because it's utter nonsense what they're saying. What they just said is utter nonsense. It's a lie. So if you know you can't win that argument, I'm not sure you should have it. Hey. All right. Thanks, everybody. Am I done, or are we going to take some questions? I can't hear you, but I see a few claps.
Right, speak up, James. All right, so my question for you about the heavy-handed, one-sided or double-edged sword that Israel has to deal with coming from organizations such as the UN, Amnesty, the Red Cross, and their lack of support, or almost prompting of behaviors that allow these anti-Semites to kind of underhandedly try and delegitimize Israel's right to. So I'm curious if you could discuss or talk about some occurrence as to why that's happening.
Well, you should start off by saying to someone, it's never not happened. Since the 1967 war, there was never any battle that Israel ever fought that the United Nations didn't condemn. So this is not new. This is not new. There's a long precedent. Israel's wars are all illegitimate. Why? Because Israel is the one state that is a delegitimate state. It doesn't have the right to exist. You have 22 failed Arab nations and Muslim nations, 22 failed, under any metric of determining success. Women's rights, gay rights, free press, rule of law, 22 failed states. The Palestine is definitely the 23rd state. You know they're not going to succeed. It's not what they can do. This is not their area. If it's not about bombs, they really aren't sure what to do. So that's the 23rd state. And yet the only state in the world that's illegitimate is the Jewish state. And you're actually telling me this is not anti-Semitism? I think all you have to say is every single war that Israel has ever fought, there was UN commissions saying, and in each of the times, they were ultimately exonerated in each of the times. Why? Because as I said to you before, Israel, they're like CPAs. They're good record keepers. I swear to you, every bullet is accounted for. They will answer any question Human Rights Watch has, and they'll answer any one, and they'll nail it every time. It won't matter. The damage will be done. The newspapers will say, war criminals, genocide, genocide. 8 months will go by, 2 years will go by, and the report will be issued. And guess what? Israel's not. They're fully exonerated. So all I'm saying is these are not, it's not, the issue is not Israel's legitimacy. The Israel is the legitimacy of the Red Cross. It's the legitimacy of the United Nations. United Nations Women, that organization, it wasn't until yesterday that they condemned the sexual violence against women. How can you be called United Nations Women as an organization set up entirely to protect against sexual violence against women and have nothing to say for the first 6 weeks of this war? Why? Because the word UN is before it. And if UN is in the sentence, it means anti-Semitism. And then the last thing is, you do know Iran is in the human rights. I'm sorry, I can't even say this. I have to laugh each time. Iran is in the Human Rights Commission of the United Nations, right? So I'm just saying, okay, yeah, you know, we're talking about nations that throw homosexuals off rooftops, hang them from cranes, behead women, dismember children, is on the Human Rights Commission. So would anyone there who's sitting here listening say, yeah, when the UN speaks, I really look at that as real legal and moral authority. It's like, you know, it's like Talmud to me. It's not.
That was a perfect
We have a
answer.
question.
I think Kali was raising her hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Hi, I'm Tali. I'm also a student. I'm just not there in person. But
Hi, Talia.
so a quick question I have for you is, have you noticed kind of a blurred line between what is considered free speech and hate speech, hate crime on college campuses right now? In our position, we've tried going to administration on multiple occasions about different protests that were happening where they used, phrases such as "from the river
Yeah.
to the sea" or "globalize the Intifada." So
First of all, if any of you are interested in my essays, you should ask Daniel, send me an email, and I will put you on the distribution listserv. You get it. A few essays ago, I answered that, Talia. I answered that exact question. My last book is entitled "Saving Free Speech from Itself." The First Amendment is one of my areas. So I am telling you what you should do. Your next attack against the university, because they're always going to say the following: anything you say that criticizes Hamas is Islamophobic. Anything that you say that and anything that is said against Israel has academic freedom, right? You see that. I mean, I'm giving you not something you won't really. You're saying, wait a minute, that's twisted. What honest person says that? Can't be an honest person. Wait, I don't get it. If I respond, it's Islamophobic. When they attack us, it's academic freedom, the First Amendment. I would just say to them the following, and if you write me out, you can use one of my last two essays, which is that the First Amendment is not unlimited. There are categories that are prohibited, like libel, like obscenity, right? Like you can't shout fire in a crowded theater. You probably have heard that before, right? Well, there are two others that no one really wants to talk about. Just so happens. One is called fighting words, which is words that are just on their own utter nonsense, totally devoid of ideas, that are designed entirely to get someone to punch you back. They're fighting words. That's what they are. They're not contributing to the marketplace of ideas. They're just there to elicit rage. And the legal system is saying, oh, incitement is another area. If you incite violence, right? So I'm going to say, so that's one. Another area is incitement, okay? Incitement of imminent lawlessness. If you're revving up people with the river to the sea, you should be very careful what your next words are. Because if you focus on a person or a place and the crowd goes in that direction, it's imminent lawlessness. That is not protected. If someone turns around and starts picking on Talia because they know she's Jewish, someone just run to the president's office and say, that is not protected speech. If we're spitting in her face from the river to the sea, we have now inciting a riot. That is not protected in this. The founding fathers did not create the First Amendment for that. And the other is called true threats, the third, which means if what you said is not just speech, but is in part or in design to be a true threat to somebody, right? And I would argue the river to the sea pretty much is, it's at least on the line, right? The river to the sea is a true threat. And if in fact it results in people getting terrible emails or Instagram posts about being Jewish, guess what? You've now proven that this was a true threat, that it should never have been protected speech. So again, the university professors are cowards. They're terrified of the humanities departments, terrified. The least smart people on campus are the humanities department, and they're scared of them. They're terrified of them, and they're terrified of students. And so the university professors, presidents know this, and they don't believe me. They're probably heard what I just said. Someone must have told them that. They don't care because they know you're the minority and they can run over you. They'll run over the Jews because they're white and they're privileged, and no one will stand up for the Jews. But if we were to do anything to stop the protests outside, which has language that are fighting words, incitement, and true threats, right? I just gave you some great stuff, right? Because you should sit there in the back and go, is that a fighting word? Wait a minute, did I just hear a true threat? That sounds like incitement. That is not protected speech. The founding fathers created the First Amendment for what? To go to the town square, put down a soapbox, get on a soapbox and say, I think Palestinians deserve a country, and this is why. That's fine. You want to explain that? You want to argue why we rejected the peace deals? Fine, let's have a talk. We rejected, fine, but here's why we rejected it, right? If you want to have a discussion about policy, that's what ideas, that's what Hamilton and Madison had in mind. If your purpose is to scream, kill Jews through some veiled references and slogans, there is no way that Madison and Hamilton thought they would, if they were here today, they'd go, that's not right. Why are they using the First Amendment to protect that? That's not an idea. That's hate. Now, remembering United States, unlike Europe, is an unusual democracy. We are the only democracy in the world that doesn't have hate speech laws. We don't. So don't use the word hate speech because we don't have it. I gave you something that you can use. Constitutional principles, true threats, fighting words, incitement, right? Because we really don't. So when people use the word, that's hate speech. In England, yeah, in France it would be. In the United States, we're very proud of the freedoms of the First Amendment. So we're very, very, very permissive. And so that's why university presidents are getting away with this, because they know we have a long history of being really permissive. All kinds of stories, Nazis marching on a town of Holocaust survivors, people that burn flags, the Klan burning flags on the homes of African Americans. Can you believe we even allow that in this country, right? In Austria or Germany or France, if you were Nazis trying to march, they would march you straight to jail. You go, what? Okay, you can march, that's the jail. Here, they give you an award from the ACLU that you express your free speech.
So one more question.
One more, guys, make it good.
Oh,
We choose between you, like we have one.
you go.
You.
Okay, mine's a little bit of pushback. Pushback?
Good,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, go.
go for it.
Right, so firstly, everything you just said recently, I completely agree with. As a fellow liberal Jew, I have some pushback on some of the things you said, especially in terms of solutions. I agree that Israel has the moral right to kill every Hamas fighter indiscriminately. I think that's quite clear. However, I do think when we are dealing with highly urban fighting situations as we are here, and there is going to be a lot of collateral damage, what I push back on is the responsibility on the Palestinian civilians that it seems you have deemed they have because of the election back in 2001 or whatever it was.
2006, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay, right. My question is, first of all, if Hamas would have theoretically won further elections, why haven't there been further elections? And secondly,
Because they're building tunnels. Why would you take time off if you know the people are with you and your idea is to kill the Zionist enemy? All right, anyway, I'm just saying, to me, that, okay, that would be my one answer to that. Go ahead, sorry.
okay, got it. My other question then is, does killing terrorists actually work? Does war on terror as a concept actually eliminate the problems of jihadism when all it creates are more of the so-called martyrs that are being used as the moral equivalency for the attack on October 7th and for them to continue. So my ideal future after all the hostages are rescued, hopefully, of course, is to really focus on education of Gaza when 80% of people are studying the Palestinian syllabus, which actively promotes jihad and Sharia law. I think there are better solutions to actually destroying terrorism at its root than actually killing terrorists, because I think that more will just pop up. Like a hydra.
I have two responses. What's your name?
Jonah.
Jonah, I appreciate that questions. They're very good, actually. So let me give you two very quick responses. You guys are in Boston, right? If I said to you on Patriots Day, let's all go and stand at the finish line of the Boston Marathon, would you all go with me?
Yeah.
Probably. You know why? Because you never hear any about Al-Qaeda anymore. And you really don't hear. So to say that it doesn't go away, no, it does. Now, do I think that America doesn't have another terrorist strike in its future, given the porousness of the southern border? You can bet on it. And you know what? I probably wouldn't go with you this year, but I would have gone with you last year. And none of you would have avoided it. There was a time here that I wouldn't let my kids, or I wouldn't go into the subway in New York. And from 2001 for years, I didn't go into a subway. Not after the subway bombings in London and Madrid. I think I'm nuts. I don't think about it now. So Jonah, I would just say, to say that, you know, it doesn't ever go away is not true. Have you heard much about ISIS lately? So, I mean, it seems to me that if you're, in terms of what's threatening the United States, it's not Al-Qaeda, and it doesn't seem to be ISIS. They still like to behead people, but so many of them are dead that they're just beheading fewer people nowadays. And I think that would be something that could theoretically happen to Hamas. The other question you made, you didn't make, because you're my friend, you didn't want to say, Thane, you're holding them collectively responsible, and collectively responsible isn't legal. Well, no, that's true, right? And what I'm making an argument is that, but there is some complicity. It doesn't mean they're in the same, they're just like the difference between first-degree murder and manslaughter. To say, I wrote this in the Wall Street Journal 10 years ago during the last war, and I was hammered all over the world. And Jonah's going to go, oh shit, you didn't say that. I did. I wrote an essay in the Wall Street Journal in which I said, you know, the Geneva Convention was never written, I always say this line, with Hamas and Gazans in mind. They just were. They never imagined this kind of a group. And the truth is, in defining civilians, they never thought about civilians that would allow the enemy to embed with them, that they would allow themselves to be martyred and sacrificed, that they would be proud of their children for being martyred and killed. And so, you know, I'm not sure that we can use the word civilians who are from Gaza, but I'm not sure we can use the words innocent civilians. That doesn't mean civilians should be killed. I was just questioning the word innocent, because I'm not sure innocent applies across the board. I'm not sure, right? Does that make me a racist? A lot of people I think do, but I'm just not sure. I'm saying, I don't know, if you are aiding and abetting and loving it, if you are throwing candy when those guys came back with their motorcycles, with the girls, bloody girls on the back of motorcycles, and you're throwing candy, I don't know, Jonah. I'm sorry. I don't think of you as an innocent civilian. I don't. You may be a civilian, you weren't there. But if you're cheering on someone that just beheaded a baby, and he's telling you, I cut a pregnant Israeli woman's body open and threw the fetus out, and you're saying, praise Allah, I don't know, Jonah. I'm sorry. If that's collective responsibility, sign me up.
As a follow-up then,
I think we need to mark
We're out of time, 10 minutes over, but.
Oh, sorry about that, guys.
No,
It's okay.
don't worry.
You did room, I did 10 minutes ago, but. No, we're good.
What do you think, Mark? One more question?
Yeah, Jonah can respond, but then that's really because we only have the room till like 7, so I'm not trying to
Oh,
kick down.
last question then. Yeah.
Is this still Jonah?
Yes.
Okay.
I guess my follow-up to that then is, what about, I don't think you can, I agree that you can't say across the board every single civilian in Gaza is completely innocent, just like you can't say that every, German civilian in, 1940 is completely innocent, because of complacency, of course, But what about babies,
What about what about what? Sorry.
babies? Just like the Jewish
Wait, I don't know what that
babies.
means. I couldn't hear it. I'm sorry.
He said babies thing, he was asking what.
Babies.
Oh, babies. Babies, yeah.
Much like the Jewish babies that were beheaded and, put in ovens simply for being born in Israel. I
Yeah, I get it.
very much feel bad for the babies that were their
I
only
know.
crime being born in Gaza.
It's horrifying. It's grotesque. It's far horrifying, but it's legal. And it may in fact be immoral too. Sorry. Why? They're not targeted. There is nobody targeted. Believe me, there is no IDF, there's no IAF soldier that's trying to kill a baby. That's why it's not genocide. Nobody here is, no Israeli is trying to eliminate, systematically wipe the Palestinian people off the earth. That's not genocide. You guys know that the Palestinian population has tripled since 1947 and doubled. So I don't know. I mean, it's an insult to Jews and Armenians and Rwandans and Cambodians and Bosnians. Those populations all took a serious subtraction, big dip. So it's only the Palestinians that can triple and still use the word. But all I would say, Jonah, I'm with you, buddy. I hold myself out as a human rights law professor. What does that mean? I'm not supporting, and that's why people have used that against me. Thane Rosenbaum believes in killing Palestine. Of course I don't. I just don't know what Israel's supposed to do. If the baby is in a hospital that has a command center and the most sophisticated weapons, and Israel is using, again, what's the standard? Precision, intelligence gathering, and humanitarian gestures. Sending flyers, knocks on the roof, communicating in advance, get the hell out of here. No army in the world has ever said, get the hell out of here. It's the only army that's ever done that. Get the hell out. And because Jonah's going to freak out, get the babies out of the nursery, for God's sakes. Get them out. Because Jonah's going to freak out. Thane's going to freak out. Get the babies out. But if they are providing, if it's done for humanitarian warnings, giving people provisions, fuel, electricity, water, you know the Israelis are doing this. And by the way, that too is not clear under the laws of war, but they're doing it. And they're gathering intelligence of what's underneath. And the threat is to all of Israel and all Jews, including Jonah sitting in Boston. The threat is against him. I don't know, and I'm sure your mother might agree with me, Jonah. I know of no moral principle, you can quote me, that a Palestinian baby is more valuable than Jonah. Maybe. I don't know of any. If you know of a moral principle that Jonah's mother has to lose her son, who is a reservist or fights in the IDF. Oh, and one more thing that Israel does, again, remember I said precision? It's more than precision, Jonah. Israel is now going house to house urban warfare. You know what that means? They're taking casualties among IDF soldiers. It's not an aerial campaign. They're inside. That means IDF soldiers. Israel's doing it by the book. And although you may grieve for the Palestinian baby, me too, buddy, but I don't know what they're supposed to do. Precision, intelligence, door to door, so that they're trying to aim at Hamas. They're not aiming at incubators or they're not aiming for it. It's true collateral damage and it's sick, but it's not Israel's fault. The world should demand punishment against Hamas for what they're doing to their babies.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you,
so
Dave.
much. Thank you.
All right, gang. Stay healthy.